Welcome to the consulting rooms of Deckard and Booth. We are your cinematic sleuths, investigating the best, worst, and forgotten movies of film noir. Today's case, none other than Out of the Past from 1947, starring Robert Mitchum, Jane Greer, and Kirk Douglas. Our private eye escapes his past to run a gas station in a small town, but his past catches up with him. Now he must return to the big city world of danger, corruption, double crosses, and duplicitous dames. Luke,
yes.
Views on Out of the Past. Is this your first time watching it? Am I right in saying?
Yeah, this is my very first time watching this movie. I had never seen Out of the Past for whatever reason. You know, it happens. Movies pass you by. So yeah, this is the first time watching it, and my initial reaction from it was that I really love this movie.
Yeah. Well, does that tagline, doesn't that say it all? It's quintessential film noir, isn't it?
It does. No, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was so interesting from start to finish, kind of where it picks up and then where it goes and then how it ends and how it plays with time, and it's not linear, and it's really a fascinating movie. Yeah. Love it.
It's one of those films that's often held up as, cited as being one of the best film noirs of all time.
Yes.
And I think that's understandable.
Yes. Well, it's something we might get into a bit later or nowish, but after I was watching it, I was like, how does this compare to like Bogart in The Big Sleep or The Maltese Falcon and those? And there was a part of me, I'm not gonna lie, there's a part of me that I think might like hold this one a little bit higher than those two.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue too much with you about that. It shares things with The Big Sleep, I think, in that it's so convoluted. The plot is so convoluted, and it's got that same sort of dream quality that we talked about on the Big Sleep episode. That same sort of, it's all about the atmosphere and the style rather than actually what's going on. But there is a lot going on plot-wise. There's a lot of moving parts in this, and you do have to keep your head screwed on to.
You do. I was noticing that really early on when we first meet Whit, played by Kirk Douglas. It brings in Jeff, who's played by Robert Mitchum, who's the star of the PI. Brings him in for that conversation, and then they do a flashback, and we're with Jeff, and we're with Whit, and we're with Joe, and we're with Jeff's partner, and all that kind of stuff. And they don't really say anyone's name either in that scene, so you really have to you have to be slow and sort of pay attention to then kind of catch up as the movie keeps going to kind of work out, right, that's Whit, right? That's the guy who Joe was talking to him about at the gas station. Oh, okay. And stuff. And even, I'm not jumping, I don't jump ahead or anything like that, but even when Jeff is in San Francisco and he sees his old partner, I'm not gonna lie, there was a moment that I was like, I don't recognize that guy.
Yeah. First viewing, definitely.
Yeah.
It's a film, as a lot of these really classic film noirs are, it's a film that pays to have multiple viewings, I think. Because it's very difficult to keep up with it when you're brand new to it. Like you say, that no one's mentioning each other's names. Then there's Jeff and Joe. They're quite similar when you're trying to keep up with a convoluted plot as well. Yeah, but I know what you mean about the partner, because you do forget who he is until they make it clear when there's that brilliant confrontation scene between him and Robert Mitchum. And I like the fact that it's not linear. Very often these films, private eye films especially, start with the PI either in his office being consulted by a client.
Yes.
Or go into the client's house. So that's The Big Sleep and The Maltese Falcon there. Murder My Sweet's told in flashback, isn't it? But this one sort of jumps back and forth in time a lot.
Yes.
And I find that quite fascinating, really.
Yes. Yeah. That's Murder My Sweet does do that, but this one plays with it a little bit differently, and I appreciated that. It's clear. It's very clear when it's playing with time, and you clearly know where you are and when you are. But it's interesting. I was looking up the writer. Daniel Mainwaring is his real name, and his pseudonym is Jeffrey Holmes. So this movie was initially titled "Build My Gallows High."
Yeah,
it was the name of the book, and that was the name of the UK release of this movie. So it wasn't called Out of the Past when it originally released in the UK. The film originally released, actually, the date was November 25th, 1947 in the US. So it's heck of an old film. But Daniel, when he was talking about this film, he's quoted as saying, "With Build My Gallows High," which was his last novel. It's a heck of a novel to go out on, by the way.
It sure is.
Because the other thing I should clarify is Daniel not only wrote the novel, but he's also the screenwriter. He also wrote the script, with a little bit of uncredited revisions, apparently, from Frank Fenton and James M. Cain, who obviously wrote Postman Always Rings Twice and Double Indemnity and things like that. But anyway,
I suspect that was largely dialogue.
Wouldn't be surprised. Dialogue is cracking in this movie, but So Daniel is quoted as saying, "With Build My Gallows High, I wanted to get away from straight mystery novels. Those detective stories are a bore to write. You've got to figure out, quote, who done it. I get to the end and have to say who done it and be so mixed up I couldn't decide myself." And it's true. I mean, we kind of complained about that with our Big Sleep review a while ago, and it can happen in a lot of mystery novels where you get to the end, and this is where I always say, when it comes to like crime fiction and even good mystery movies, everyone, marketing wise, everyone loves to bang on about the twists and you'll never see this coming. No one remembers the effing twists. No. Like, they just don't. What they remember are the characters, the dialogue, the sets, that stuff.
And a film that relies on a twist is a one-trick pony, really. And once you've seen the twist,
yes,
then if that's all that it is, if that's all the film consists of, then it's pointless watching it again. It's worthless watching it again.
It's why I am so unexcited for the Knives Out 3 that they're talking about right now, because we've seen Knives Out 1. We know what the gimmick is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Convoluted baloney.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. The least said about those films, the better, I think.
Yes.
But I think it's, you're right. Once the twist is out there, a bit like those Golden Age crime novels where they were very much a puzzle.
Yes.
The best Golden Age is more than that, but they're very much a puzzle. And once you know the trick to that puzzle, once you know how that magic trick is done, then what are you left with? There's not a great deal left there, but here you've got so much more that's still to fathom and still to deal with. Once the final reel is and the final credits have rolled.
Yeah, no, it's true. So Out of the Past was a commercial success. I couldn't find the box office for it, but apparently it made $90,000 in profit. So that's pretty good.
And it was a welcome success, I think, for RKO, who were pretty much in the red by a significant amount of money. And this did a lot to redress the balance, I think.
Yes,
and unusually for a film of its type, which at the time they were often seen as B movies, weren't they? But this had quite a big budget, as far as I've been able to gather.
Yeah,
and certainly a cast. I mean, Mitchum and Douglas were at the starts of their careers, but still, they were names. They were sort of.
Douglas was less so. This is only his third movie.
Was on his way up, and so the studio threw quite a bit behind this film, which I think is it's a compliment more than anything else. But it paid off. It paid off.
Yeah.
It certainly did RKO a massive favor.
I suspect that more than the cast, I suspect the reason the studio kind of put more into it was down to the director.
Very much.
Jacques.
So.
How do you pronounce the director's name?
Tourneur, I think it is.
Tourneur. That guy. I think it's a little bit down to him, and I think it's also down to the writer of the movie, because he's a big writer, big director. The studio was also known. RKO was known for doing a lot of B movies, and stuff like that. But the director had some clouts and had some successes, and also came from he's like a classic nepo baby. His dad was a French director, and so he grew up in cinema. He grew up in that world, and then became a director himself. So he's like a classic nepo baby. So I think there was enough sort of talent behind it all.
Yeah, definitely.
Not to mention at all, also like Jane Greer, who played
my God.
Jane Greer, who played Kathy Moffat, was a sweet little darling of Howard Hughes. So there's stuff attached to this that's like, oh yeah, let's put some money behind this. This could be big because, you know, there is some serious talent behind this one for sure.
Yeah.
But
I certainly agree about Tourneur. He's fabulous, and he's a good choice for film noir because he's very much into atmosphere. I mean, he made Cat People for Val Lewton.
Yes.
And not long after this film, he made one of my all-time favorite horrors, which is Night of the Demon with Dana Andrews. Curse of the Demon in America. And that is all about, apart from the big puppet monster, that is all about atmosphere and dread. And it's all in the shadows, and it's very noirish.
Yes.
Night of the Demon.
Yeah.
So he did have some pedigree in building up atmosphere out of shadows and light and very little else. Which makes him a great noir pick.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I loved about this movie, it was kind of talking about him and how he uses light and shadow, is, I mean, there's a clip or a scene in Cat People where there's a woman walking down the street at night, and she's being followed, and it's very tense, and the shadows are super dark. You only see her when she's underneath the street lights and stuff like that. It's very noir, very noir, and I love that. But one of the things that's interesting is particularly with this film is a lot of times these old movies will do trickery like day for night scenes. We'll just put like a lens over it. He's not doing any of that stuff. Like if he's filming at night, it's filming at night.
It's night.
A lot of real locations are being used for this as well. And so it just gives everything a more texture, more lived, more real.
It does. It adds a realism to it, definitely. I mean, a lot of it is in studio and backlot and all the rest of it. But when it is on location, no doubt it is on location at some, it's very well shot as well. It's very well photographed.
Yeah. I mean, interiors are going to be all sets, but like, there's a heck of a lot of location, really well used location stuff, I think.
Yeah, there is, and the director of photography is he called Musaraka? I don't know how you pronounce it.
Musaraka.
He worked with Tourneur before on several projects, and went on to do Night of the Demon with him. I'm fairly certain. So they understood each other. And they knew how each other worked and how each other clicked, and it's a brilliant team. It's one of those golden director and cinematographer teams that really work well. They make the most out of every scene in terms of the way it's lit, shot, and directed. As far as I can see, it's masterful.
Yes. Yeah. I think so. I was taken by all of the sets, not just the sets, but like the clothes, everything about it was just so well lit. And like the wonderful use of backlighting and things like that. So like there's a scene very late in the film where Jeff is hiding in a corner, hiding in a kind of in a dark room where the phone is ringing, and then Kathy comes in to answer it. And he's hiding in the dark room, but like the way the backlighting works, you see his outline perfectly. Like there's just there's so many scenes like that throughout this movie where and I think I'm I miss this about movies. I'm probably over exaggerating a little bit, but like when you think of like today's, when you consider that this kind of movie used to be considered like the B movie, right?
Yeah.
And like nowadays the B movie, i.e. the superhero movies, stuff like that, are like the A movie now. The so many A movies are so boring to look at, particularly in the comic book genre. They're flat lighting, very dull, very glossy, very fake. And I miss dynamic lighting in movies.
Absolutely.
And we get it somewhere. I mean, like Dune looked really good in places, and there are movies, Blade Runner 2049 as well. Like there are movies that still do it, but I do think in general, like your typical popcorn blockbusters don't have it as much as what they used to, and it's sad.
No, it is sad. It is sad. And I know the scene you mean, but there's also one a little bit earlier than that and it's a similar effect when Mitchum's hiding in an alleyway outside a hotel or a block of flats, it might be. And he follows Meta Carson, the accountant's secretary or the lawyer's secretary. And the cab driver's like waiting for him. And when he's lit in that alleyway, it's absolutely, I mean, it's noir in a frame. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And that sort of texture of and lighting effect that black and white films have, and noir films especially have in spades, I think is something that it's a form of beauty that's no longer like around. We don't see it anymore. Yeah. And it isn't just what it proves is it's not just enough to film in black and white, to make it look like this film, because it won't. You need to have the light. You need to have the lighting, the camera position, and all the rest of it. Shooting in black and white is only one part of the process to me.
Yes, and
there are so many films that are shot in black and white that don't need to be, and they just do it because they think it looks good.
Yes,
and that's a real failing on filmmakers and TV.
Yeah, I mean, I think two recent-ish examples. I say ish because time is moving quite quickly now. But like I was thinking, mainly because there's the new Furiosa movie out, and I recently rewatched all of the Mad Max movies, and Fury Road is famous for having its chrome version, its black and white version. And I remember when that came out, people were calling for it, saying, "Oh, this movie will look great in black and white." Da 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 da. And I just remember thinking, no, it won't. Like, it wasn't shot for black and white. Why would it look like, unless they're going to do a lot of work? And I remember watching the black and white version, and I was right. I was like, this doesn't look, it's better in color because it was made for color. It wasn't,
exactly.
And they did the same thing with Logan when the last, well, it was meant to be the last Wolverine movie came out. People are like, this needs black and white. It's so noir. It needs black and white. And James Mangold, the director, was like, look, I'm not going to make you guys pay for a black and white version. I'm just going to press a button and turn all the color off. that's what he did. And it's like,
just it fails completely. He misses the point entirely.
Yeah, but because I mean, I think that was kind of the point. He was like, it's not a movie that was made for black and white. It wasn't shot. So this is all I can do.
It's noir, so it should be black and white, as if that's like the end of the story. Forget all the expressionism influence and forget all the lighting that you need and all the rest of it. It's just things like that are just lazy thinking to me. Lazy.
Yes. So I think whenever we're back and we're doing these proper old movies, I really do sort of bask in how much talent went into making this black and white stuff work. I mean, that scene with Kathy when in Mexico, when Jeff is waiting in the bar for her, right? Yeah. And she comes, he's waiting in the bar. He's already back to kind of that dreamscape, right? He actually says that he's kind of fading in and out of sleep and only kind of being woken up. And then as if coming out of a dream, he sees her walking into the bar, but she's all in white dress, white hat. The background behind her is this kind of white, and she just sort of emerges out of this white space, and you don't really properly see her and become a fully formed person until she enters the shadow of the interior of the bar. And it's like that wasn't just like coincidence, like that was the intentionally shot to have that effect, and it's stunning.
And that's why noir uses shadow and light as contrast, but also to complement each other, and that's exactly what he does in that scene. Because she's almost ethereal. She just appears, and she is dressed in white. Although it's an easy point to make, but as she goes on, her clothes change. Yes. So she goes into grey, and then she goes into jet black.
Yes,
as her character does likewise. We'll come on to that later. But those sort of stage and the fact that Mitchum is sitting in shadows, and he says something about we never met in the daytime. The daylight was like the packet of cigarettes that you smoked, and just in a way, because he's in the shadows already. He's already, and he knows he is. He's already on this collision course. But at the time, she is meant to appear as a sort of angel, almost. She's she's pure and innocent at that stage, as far as he's concerned. And it's so you're right. None of this is by chance.
No.
This is properly set up as a choice of photography and a choice of costume. And when it shows and it's done this well, the payoff is amazing. You almost sort of miss the dialogue because you're just gazing at what's happening visually in front of you. It's beautiful looking film.
So I love kind of how this story starts, and because it starts very humdrum. It starts in Bridgeport, California. There's this backwater town in the middle of nowhere. Jeff he owns a gas station now, and that's how he's making his living. And then that's where an old buddy of his, Joe, finds him, right? And he's, oh, well, Whit wants to see you, and he's, basically, the sins of the past are calling on him now. He's got to pay the piper for something he didn't do. And I like that Jeff has this other girlfriend named Anne, and like she is so plain Jane. Anne is like the quintessential like blonde American good girl, right? Let me bake you an apple pie and put your slippers in front of your feet.
Yeah. She's exactly right. Yeah.
Kind of person. But like everyone knows that particularly her parents know that Jeff is shady, and they don't know why, but they can tell that he's shady. And I love this scene where basically Joe tells Jeff, hey, Whit wants to see you. Go drive down to Lake Tahoe and meet him at his house. And he's like, fine, I'll do it. Really, the whole point of taking Anne is to give us the backstory, is to take us from the present into the past.
Yeah.
Which I loved. And I love the fact that these two characters, this shady guy, Jeff, who isn't really going by his real name. He's calling himself Bailey, but his name is Markham. And she knows that Anne knows there's something shady about him, but he won't say fully. And then in the middle of the night, he takes her away and says, come with me to Lake Tahoe. She's like, okay. And then while they're driving, he's like, okay, I need to tell you my past is cut up with me. I need to tell you what's going down. Do you really want in on this? Do you really want in? And she's like, I want in. Tell me everything. He goes, okay, it's going to hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, tell me.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I like the fact that it's done that way. It says something about Jeff. It certainly says something about Anne. And, it says that she's desperate for the truth no matter what it is, and even if it does hurt, which becomes important later on in the final scene. But I like the fact that I have a sort of love-hate relationship with, as you know, with voiceovers in this sort of film. Too often I think it's done just because novels like this are often in the first person. And I don't always think you need that. But there is at least a plot device reason for this voiceover. Yeah. And it is delivered in a way that you can believe he's telling her this in the car. So this is one of those occasions where it definitely works for me.
Yeah, I love the voiceover. I thought it added a wonderful dimension to the movie. I think
it does. And it's not overdone either, is it? It's not it's not overly literary, if you know what I mean. It sounds like somebody explaining what they did a few years ago.
Yeah, it's not like the voiceover in Blade Runner. Where it's like sushi. That's what my ex-wife used to call me. Cold fish.
Yeah, no, it's not like that. Well, it's very much like the voiceover in Murder My Sweet, which again is one that I accept.
Fantastic one. Yeah.
And he's really well presented. That they sort of go hand in hand for me. But yeah, she does go with him on this nighttime drive, and there's that really great bit where you can hear a mother in the house, but you don't see her. Saying he's no good.
What kind of a man doesn't come to the door?
He won't even come in the house. She says.
I know. I loved it.
It does make me smile that once they get to Lake Tahoe and they get to Kirk Douglas's house, he just says to her, "Right, you can drive back now."
Yes.
She don't stay.
It's interesting because I think he's doing that to protect her. I think he knows that this is dangerous. He needs to get there, and I guess I don't know whose car. I guess we're using his car. I guess it's his car. So it is. But it's almost like he is trying to decide what his future is going to be by telling her the past while needing to confront the future and the past of the future. And
I think that's right, because past and future are definitely the themes of this film.
Yeah.
And how the one will always get you.
Yes, because I think what happens with him, I feel like once he gets to Whit's house, and we first meet Whit in flashback form, and he's been shot by his girlfriend, and she's absconded with $40,000, and Whit is willing to pay $10,000 just to get her back. He doesn't even care about the 40 grand. He just
doesn't
wants
care about
her
the
back.
money. No,
And
he says in a great line, he says, "You'll understand when you see her."
Yes, and that's exactly what Jeff ends up saying is, and I knew why Whit didn't care about the 40 grand.
Yes, he does.
Because I mean, she, Jane Greer is a stunning lady, and I mean, my God, she is gorgeous in this movie, so gorgeous. So it's like,
she really is.
Maybe the most stunning femme fatale in cinema history, maybe.
Yeah,
I will go so far as to say that, at least for now. But yeah, so I love that this is all about this runaway beauty, and you kind of feel for her. You're kind of scared for her, and you're kind of rooting for her at the same time. She's like, yeah, she's got away from this gangster guy. He's a bad dude. He had an iron grip on her. He wanted to control her. She shot him, got away, but he's not dead. So she's going after him. And I guess the thing is, like, as we go throughout this flashback, where the flashback ends, we don't really know where she goes.
No,
where Kathy goes. And I think for Jeff, in relation to having brought Anne to drive the car back, I feel like for him, everything changes the minute he turns up to Whit's house and finds Kathy there. The fact that she's there, she's still alive, she's still involved, really starts to play with his mind, because as we learned from the flashback, he was a sap for her, and he knew it, but he didn't care because she was just that amazeballs.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with all that. He already goes knowing she's set him up essentially, and left him with no choice but to leg it and go into hiding. And I think you're right. The minute he sees her again, and again, this is the theme coming out. His past then suddenly intrudes upon his present and his future.
Yeah.
That is definitely what this film is about. One of the things that occurred to me watching it again is how open it is. Very often film noir, this sort of story is one town or one city. This is what do we get here? We get California, we get Mexico, we get
this is globetrotting. This is a globetrotting adventure.
Yeah, and I think that's on purpose as well. And I think doesn't matter how far Jeff runs, he can run to the mountains, he can run to Mexico, he can run to San Francisco, he can run anywhere. His past is always going to get him. The fact that it's a globetrotting, for want of a better phrase, works to its advantage. It's a change from the norm, but it's also a very important theme.
I get what you're saying there with that, because I think what's also interesting about this film and certain film noirs at the time is that, particularly ones that are sort of like set in the in the Mexico, South America part of the world. I mean, because you have things like films like Notorious and whatnot that spend a lot of time there, particularly in a post World War II world, and almost give that part of the world a romantic, fantastic element. I mean, the whole time that throughout the movie, I love the fact that Kathy keeps wanting to, she keeps telling Jeff, "Oh, it's fine. We'll go back to Mexico. We'll go back to Mexico," as if like they're going to relive the dream. They're going to, be able to escape into a fantasy that. And so Mexico kind of in this movie really plays into the fantasy of their relationship, because their relationship is a fantasy the whole time.
It is. Yeah, it is.
And once they leave Mexico, once they leave South America, the fantasy ends. The fantasy it instantly begins to fall apart. You know, they're having fun for a bit, but then they're being chased, and then blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So it's but I like that aspect.
Yeah, because it was in Mexico when they first meet, where they are both innocents in that moment. You know,
yes,
he doesn't know what she is, she doesn't know what he is, and when they know that about each other, the badness starts. So it is a callback to when things were simpler.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a universal theme, isn't it? But you're right. You're right. When he sees her again, he definitely says, you know, this is going to be the past coming back to haunt me yet again. And at one point in Mexico, he says something along the lines of, "How big a chump can you be?" Well, I was finding out.
Yes.
You know, and I knew I was a sucker before I even saw her. So he knows, but he can't get out of it. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
But he'd run away. He'd run away from it to run his gas station, and then he's dragged back into his past. And you're right. When he sees her, it sort of starts to happen again.
And what's really interesting to me is, and I don't know if this is. It's been a very long time since I've read Casino Royale, and I know that Vesper Lynn is the the nasty Femme Fatale in that book and in the movie. But what's really interesting to me is this. I guess we'll compare it to the movie because that's what's in my head. Is I love the fact that in Out of the Past, Jeff finds Kathy and they instantly hit it off. There's an instant romance, and all he wants to do is forget the case. She says, "I ran away. I didn't take the money. I don't even have it." And then they just kind of run away in this sort of grand love affair.
Yeah.
And it's very captivating. It's very believable. The sparks between Mitchum and Greer are insane. Like
they are insane.
I would say there was more chemistry between Mitchum and Greer than I would say Bogart and Bacall. Like
I'd agree 100%.
It was spicy.
Yeah, and oddly, because despite the fact that Bogart and Bacall were a real couple,
I know
I believe in these two far more than I do in those two.
I do too.
Even in their real life relationship, I believe these two more.
It was nuts to me. It was sizzling. The scenes between them were sizzling,
and there is that instant, almost animal attraction between the two of them. You know,
yes.
and the initial flirting is not overdone. It's not film dialogue. It's two people. You know.
Yes.
She tells him about a bar where they often play American music for $1. She pay him $1, and then she ends it by saying, "I go there sometimes."
Yeah.
So he goes every night.
Yes.
Until she turns up. You know.
Yes.
There's none of that. I'll be there tomorrow at 8:00.
No, I love that. And sorry, back to like my what I was thinking about with the Casino Royale stuff. I love. It's weird that this whole like kind of like the opening into the middle of this movie is this runaway whirlwind romance that you just sort of sucked into and you're rooting for, and it's all flowers and petals and clearly lots of banging, but
yeah.
But then when I think about Casino Royale, like the Casino Royale kind of does the same thing, but like weirdly tacked on at the end of the movie, where after the gambling stuff's all over, after they've done sending of the funds, Vesper and Bond go off on their whirlwind love affair, for it to suddenly turn sour and for her to die and all that kind of stuff. And it was interesting to me to kind of be getting that sort of vibe, and I wondered if, because again I can't remember if it was in Casino Royale the book or how that fully played out in the book, but I was just sort of like, I don't know, they felt quite similar, but the placement of it in Casino Royale felt like the movies began to drag, whereas this was just so seamlessly woven into the plot that I just sort of was really, really invested in it. When she leaves and we kind of end the flashback, I was like, no, what's going to happen now?
It's definitely better presented. But I think, again, it's a long time since I've read the novel. But I think it does happen. It might not happen. I don't think it necessarily happens in Venice. Mm-hmm. But certainly after he's had his terrible incident with the carpet beater, I think they do. I think they go to like a retreat, and that's when they sort of become lovers and stuff like that. So it does come on at the end. In the book as well as the film. But this does it so much better. I mean, it's a similar plot point, if you like.
It is, yeah.
Kind of whirlwind romance and that interrupts the crime drama for a while. But this does it so much better, and it just handles it far more fluidly. And I just believe in it more for that reason.
Because like in the film, almost for a while, as I was watching it, almost sort of stops. I don't want to say stops being a noir movie, but for a while, you're sort of just watching a romantic drama.
Yeah, Dorothy Sayers once said about one of her crime novels, it's a romance novel with crime interruptions, or if you prefer, it's a crime novel with romantic interruptions. And I think this is the same applies for this. But I think what works so well is that you are carried away with that romance, and you do sort of wish them well.
You do.
And you do forget that this is a film noir crime drama until that moment when he opens the door expecting it to be her, and it's Kirk Douglas.
I love that.
You know,
that
and then
scene,
and then he has to play. Then he has to really sort of dissemble and brazen it out, and that is fabulous.
yes, no, that scene was wonderful. That might be one of my favorite scenes in the movie because, so for any, if you guys have not watched the movie, but there's a scene where Jeff has been in the movie, or Jeff has been to Mexico for a very long time, and wiring Wit and saying, I'm looking for it, can't find it, and then one day just Wit turns up. And what's so interesting about the character of Wit is for most of the movie, he doesn't appear threatening.
No, absolutely.
He's smiling, happy.
He's very charming, and this is why I think Douglas is a great fit for it. Because Kirk Douglas has got that. He's got that chin for one thing, but he's also got a very disarming smile.
Yes,
he's a good-looking fella in his younger days, and he is very, very charming, and he's very amiable and affable almost.
Yes.
So that if you weren't told at the outset he's a gambler and a gangster, you wouldn't know it.
Yes,
until the end of the film, I would say.
Yes, and that's what I loved about that moment is when there's a knock on the door, and you just and Mitchum's whole persona in this whole movie is so cool and calm and suave.
Yeah,
and there's so much acting. It's a bit like I'd almost in some ways compare the performance to like Ryan Gosling in Drive, where it's subtle emotion, subtle looks, subtle twitches, and that moment where he just looks at the door. He doesn't do anything. He just looks at the door, and you're instantly like, "Oh crap!
Yeah, absolutely."
Crap!" But what that also does, not only does it make you worried for Jeff and for Kathy, but it also makes you think, "Oh, if that's Kathy at the door and he's nervous, that means Wit is probably going to lose his mind."
Yeah.
And then it makes you scared of Wit all at the same time, because you're like, because he's been so kind, you're like, I don't know what he's going to do when the crap hits the fan.
Yeah.
And great to me, that's just a great villain where you're just on edge, and it's not because he's being over the top in like a comic booky jokery sort of way. He's eerily kind.
Yeah. And eerily kind, that's a great phrase, because you're right, he's not one of those over the top ones. I mean, he's as far away from Dennis Hopper in Blue Velvet as you can get,
Yeah.
And in a way he's all the more terrifying because of it. He's very it's the smiling villain with the knife behind his back under his cloak. That's what he is. He's very much like, I imagine, the villain in The Hound of the Baskervilles to be in the book. Because Stapleton's a very smiling, affable, genial man.
Yes.
He's also a sexual sadist, a wife beater, and a killer. And I think that's to the strengths, and I think Douglas pulls it off immensely well.
Yeah,
immensely well. Because it's not easy to do. It's not easy to be threatening while you're being charming.
No.
But when he turns, all that hard work pays off for me.
Yes.
And he does turn. He turns very much at the end.
Yes, I love that. But I also love the fact that Jeff he's not necessarily a step ahead, but he knows when he's being played.
Yeah.
And And I love how quickly he works out that, when he meets with Wit in Lake Tahoe, there's this whole scheme of the government. He's been not paying his taxes and all that kind of stuff, and he's got some guy who's been paying off to kind of not, turn the other way, in a very sort of, I guess, Trumpian sort of way. And the whole scheme is that he wants Jeff to steal the documents that kind of incriminate him, and get them back to him. But Jeff very quickly cons on to the fact that this is a frame. He's using me to settle an old score because I screwed up with, his girlfriend, and he does need this stuff. He does need the information. But in addition to needing the information, he also wants to hang me at the same time. So using me to get it, but I'm also going to hang on me, and it's a frame up. As he said,
it's two birds with one stone. He gets his tax affairs back. He gets rid of the blackmailer, and he gets revenge on Jeff.
Yes, yeah, and it's and I know what you're saying. Like it can feel convoluted, but it actually, I feel like the plot holds together really well. Much it holds together better than The Big Sleep, I'd say.
It certainly does.
And there's no stupid sing-song numbers.
No, you have got a fighting chance of understanding this film. Whereas
you do.
It's hit and miss on The Big Sleep.
It's true, and I quite like that. And once that kicks off, because you have the opening bit where it's we're sort of learning about his Jeff's new life, and then that is threatened by Joe, who the character of Joe, I really like Joe. He seems like such an arrogant asshole. Like, he just sort of, like, the way he just sort of lumbers around and stuff. He looks, you just want to punch him in the face. But that makes him a good like, sidearm to the bad guy. Like,
he's a good henchman.
Yeah, I like that. But yeah, so I like that. Yeah, so you kind of, like I said, we're exploring his past. Then we dive into his or his present. We dive into his past, and then now we're exploring his present, and sort of where that's going to go. And once the like the middle bit with the flashback is very sort of romance. It's a romance movie, and then the thriller noir really kicks in once that flashback is fully over. And then we're, because there's elements of it in the flashback, but it really, really kicks in once a flashback is over, and he's going to the lawyer's house and all that kind of stuff.
That's when the double crossing really starts in earnest.
Yes.
But it's slowly revealed that it's been going on all the time, the double crossing. But it's definitely in that third portion of the film where it starts to kick off, and it kicks off big style. It kicks off really quickly. And once it starts, it never seems to stop.
No,
it's constant. Then it is. We were saying before about twists. This is then twist after twist after twist, or double cross after double cross after double cross. And all the time, you're right. Jeff he's holding his own. He's holding his own, but there's still always that sort of fatalistic. He should just walk away, really, but he can't. And people keep screwing him with affidavits and various things like this. He's constantly being blackmailed into doing things he shouldn't do.
Yes.
But at the same time, he's playing his own game. So there's several games of chess going on here. Mental chess going on between these people. You
can't trust anyone, but the whole time you sort of keep wanting Jeff and Kathy to work out. You still want to believe her. She's very good. Jane Greer is very good in this role. I mean, the way she convinces you that Kathy is on Jeff's side, even when she's not, or how she explains why she's not. You're like, okay, no, that's possible. That's possible.
There's and a good example of that is when they're in the after the bit with the lawyers taking place, and it's all gone a bit wrong for Jane Greer's character, for Kathy.
Yes.
When Mitchum steps out of the shadows and she's put the phone down, and he says, "Well, it's all gone wrong for you, hasn't it?" She instantly changes and turns into the damsel in distress, essentially, and says that Wit's making her do it.
Yeah.
And you buy it first time watching. You buy it, and you think, well, what is she? That is she? Is she the Femme Fatale, or is she a scapegoat as much as Jeff is? And you sort of, it is difficult to make your mind up first time watching. Definitely,
it is. But I love it though, and I mean, once you kind of get to the big reveal at the end, I mean, once it's all said and done, I feel like it's a very satisfying conclusion, or couple of conclusions. I think when we finally get back to Lake Tahoe, and Jeff is basically Wit is almost has almost got his way, right? So the lawyer is murdered, and that is hung on Jeff, and which is disappointing, because you kind of he works so hard to make it not fall on him, that when it does come back and it is still falling on him, it's like, shit, he didn't get away with it. Then you really start seeing Kathy being manipulative in a way that we haven't seen her before. So I love the bit where she starts playing Joe for a sucker, and then he goes out to find Jeff, and that whole scene is quite interesting, because at the beginning of the movie it sets up that there's a character called the Kid who works at the gas station with Jeff, he's a deaf kid, who can read lips and also knows sign language, and speaks in sign language to Jeff. And so what interests me about that whole scene is, and maybe you can clarify this, part of me, I can't remember why the Kid turns up in Lake Tahoe. I don't know. I feel like, was that Jeff baiting?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah,
I think it is, because he's set him up. The Kid's in place, isn't he?
Yes.
So I think he knows that Joe is coming, and what Joe's intention is going to be.
Yeah.
Again, an example of him being one step ahead, and I think he's got the Kid there as ostensibly fishing, but what he actually does is throw his line to Joe's sleeve and pull his arm out of his aim. Yeah. So I think he's set him up.
He's being played. I feel like in that moment he's being played by both sides. Kathy is sending him off to. I think from her perspective, I think she probably wouldn't mind if Jeff is taken off the map. No. It's like, okay, so she'll do he'll take care of Jeff maybe, but Jeff knows that that's probably what the game is going to be. So, like you said, puts the Kid in place and then uses the Kid to stop that from happening. And then Jeff does get taken off the map. And
Kathy's motives are an interesting point, actually. I agree. I don't think she would care if Jeff was, seen off in whatever way that happened.
Yeah.
But what she's actually after isn't necessarily all that clear, because if it's just the 40 grand, like, she doesn't seem to care about that when her and Jeff are like traveling through America.
Well, she's lying though the whole time. She keeps saying, I didn't take the money, and the very last scene in the flashback is Jeff looking at the pocketbook and seeing that she deposited 40 grand, so she has the money.
That's right. So is she then saying, so is her intention always to leg it with the 40,000? And is she just sort of trying Jeff out? Or is she sort of thinking, is she having second thoughts because she's met Jeff and she actually does like him?
Mm.
A bit like Marion in Psycho. Has she stolen the money to have a better life, but then thinks, actually, there's a reason why I shouldn't be doing this?
Mm.
Or is she always after that 40 grand? And
I think she's always after the 40 grand. And the metaphorical 40 grand, because at the end of the day, Jeff isn't questioning where she's getting her money from.
No, but when she meets Jeff and clearly does like fall for him, even if that sort of turns, is she then thinking, well, this is even better? I've got the 40 grand and a new life with this fella.
I think so. Yeah. And then I think once she loses that and she goes back to Wit, then it's all about, how can I take over Wit's empire, which is essentially what she almost gets at in the end. Almost.
Yeah. Well, and in the end, it becomes, how do I just get this 40 grand and survive?
Yeah.
Without the cops coming. I mean, that's So her motives change. That's the sort of that's my reading of it. But it's not explicitly stated what her actual intention is, what her motive is, from stealing the 40 grand in the initial instance to the final scene. It's not, but I like that, because that's open to some degree of interpretation.
Well, I think it's like most femme fatales, or classic femme fatales, and particularly that era, and that motive is survival.
Yeah,
she needs to find a way to survive in this world that women can't struggle to survive in solo.
Yeah, so I agree. So I think she steals the 40 grand initially in an effort, and essentially she's trying to kill Whit. Let's face it.
Yeah, she did.
She shoots him 4 times, and I think then she's going to leg it with the 40 grand and disappear, because she's gone to Acapulco. So that's what, as Jeff says, that's where you go to sail south.
Yes.
And disappear. But then that plan becomes complicated because Jeff arrives.
Yes.
Into her life. And it becomes even more complicated when he starts throwing spanners in the works. And things start going wrong. So that sort of fluidity, the overall arch of the motive is to survive. But that sort of fluidity of what her goal actually is, and that it does change. Again, like you said before about the locations, that adds a massive amount of realism to this film for me.
Yeah, massive, because it's not cool and necessarily cool and calculated. It's she's constantly having to respond to the changing circumstances.
She's got to think on her feet. Yeah, and the scene I referenced before, where she's put the phone down, he comes out and says it's all gone wrong, and she says, well, Whit made me do it, and she bursts into tears and becomes a damsel in distress.
Yeah,
that's evidence of her ability to think on her feet and quickly.
Yes.
So I definitely think that's what it is. I think it's not one set motive of I'll steal the 40 grand and leg it. I think it becomes much more complicated and, by extension, realistic as the film goes on.
Yeah.
Until in the end, it is that desperate, like, flee. Just get out as quickly as you can.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, once because at the end of the movie, once Joe has been taken care of, and Jeff comes back and confronts Whit and confronts Kathy, and Jeff throws Kathy under the bus, and that's when we see Whit finally lose it, right? Yeah, and he slaps Kathy. It's a very, like, jarring, shocking slap. Yeah. You're like, oh my god, you really didn't see that coming, and then you see, okay, he is a nasty villain.
And that's the turn that in his character that I talked about before.
Yeah.
That speech he gives where he says, I took you back when you were whimpering and cowering, which may have been genuine whimpering and cowering. We don't know. I suspect not. And he says to her, I should have kicked your teeth in.
Right. Yes. Jeez.
I mean, that is a powerful line.
Yes.
And also you get an insight, I think, into what he has done in the past.
Yeah.
That's not the first slap. That's not the first slap.
No.
And that's when he reveals his true colors. That's when the smile drops. And it only does because he's been cornered and duped.
Yes.
And that's how he takes his revenge. But that line in the middle of that speech where he says, I should have kicked your teeth in, that is something else. That
it is. And then, of course, we know it happens off screen, but she gets the upper hand and finally kills Whit. And so then it's back to what we were saying, well, those two, Whit and Kathy and Jeff, can now run off together because, she likes Jeff enough. But Jeff, of course, is still conflicted a little bit because he goes back one more time to see Anne, and he assures Anne, I love you. I definitely am coming back for you. I just got to take care of this stuff. I didn't kill anyone. It's all a lie. I'm definitely coming back. But then he gets in that car with Anne, and I'm like, what is your motive, Jeff? What are you doing? Are you so ensnared by her, or did you have another plan? Because then I guess the big climactic ending is, as they're driving, the police have a roadblock, and they just machine gun them to death. They Or actually,
Well-
sorry, that's not true. It is partly true. Jeff and Kathy get into a fight in the car. She whips out a gun because I think she's planning to kill him and get away.
Yeah.
And then, so it's like, how much did he know was going to happen?
Well, she
or
does
not
shoot
happen?
him, doesn't she? She does shoot
shoots him. Yeah, so she kills him. She kills Jeff.
And then the police mow the car down, essentially.
Then the police kill her and mow the car down. And but yeah.
But I think what I love about this ending, it's not quite the ending, but it's pretty much the ending. And what comes after this particular scene has got its own ambiguity that we'll come on to in a minute. This is a great example of a mystery film and a crime film where it isn't necessarily all wrapped up in a nice little package for you at the end.
No.
Ambiguous endings in crime fiction exist. And when they're done well, they're very good. But by and large, things are tied up. Things are solved, essentially. Here, you are left to decide for yourself.
Yes.
What Jeff was going to do. Was the police block there because they were going to stop the car? He was going to get out and say, "She's all yours, boys," and go back to Anne for life.
Yeah.
Or was he going to say, was he going to brave it out? What was he going to do?
Yes.
I think he was going to get out of the car and say, "She's all yours," because he says, he has that line about you'll do all right, you always have, and I'll think of you looking out over the mountains from whichever women's prison it was.
Fantastic line. Yes.
I think his intention is always to make her pay for it.
Yeah, I feel like that too. I feel like that too, and I guess also to add to the ambiguity, is he dead?
Well, is he?
He was. We didn't see where he was shot. We just saw him fall out of the car. We never saw the
shot in his stomach, but all he does then is fall out of the car.
Yeah.
So you don't know if he's dead or not.
Yeah, and I guess speaking to that ambiguity and that the awkward ending, and the gingerbread white bread
apple pie girl.
lover of his goes over to the kid, the deaf kid who's sitting outside the gas station, and she asks him, was Jeff going to go away with Kathy?
Yeah.
And the kid thinks about it for a minute, nods as if to say yes, and then she gets upset and runs off and gets into a car and drives away. But then the kid looks up at the Jeff Bailey sign and salutes it.
Yeah.
And you're sort of wondering,
so the question is,
does that mean?
Has he lied to Anne or not?
Yes. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful because there's so much that you can think about with that. It's like, is he dead? Is he actually alive somewhere out there? Is he using this as another way to get farther away from all this stuff and go into deeper hiding, or set up a new life? What is going on now?
Yeah. And has the kid lied to her because he thinks she's better off thinking that he was going to go away with her, because then she won't, she'll be done with him for good.
Yeah.
Which either is because he wasn't good enough for her in the first place, or because, as you say, he's keeping some sort of pact with Jeff that we don't know about.
Yeah.
Or, so is he lying to protect her, or has he told her the truth? And that is what Jeff intended to do. We don't know. And the beauty of it is that I think there's a case to be made for both sides. I don't think there's necessarily a right answer to that.
Yeah.
I'm persuaded by one more than the other. And Holmes himself, I think, said, no, he's the kid's lying to her. I don't know. I think I prefer that interpretation.
Yeah, maybe.
I think I prefer. But next time I watch it, I might say, nah, come on.
Yeah.
How much of a happy ending is that? She goes off with the bloke she obviously only sees as a friend.
Yes.
So her life's not going to be full.
No. I will say, in terms of things that I wasn't fond of, the out of nowhere other guy, Jimmy.
Yeah.
You couldn't get more of a boring, typical middle America white man name.
Jimmy Stewart, for example.
Yeah, Jimmy and Anne. Oh boy.
Yeah.
He's
in the very first scene, isn't he? He's in the scene in the diner.
Yes. Again,
like you said about Jeff's partner, you've forgotten about him an hour and 40 minutes later.
You have, and I had, and I was like, wait, what? Okay. And I just sort of felt that the movie didn't need that.
No, I agree with that.
It just needed Anne to be upset. It didn't need a rival lover suddenly tacked on at the end. It just didn't need that.
It could easily have ended with her saying, I need to know, and the kid indicates yes, he was running away with her. She says thank you and walks off, and then the kid salutes.
Yeah.
He could watch her walk away for a while back to her parents' house or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he salutes the garage sign. That would have been perfectly fine. Because
even that scene between Jeff and Jimmy, where Jimmy's like, I was going to kill you, but now I'm not. I heard what you said to Anne, blah, 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 blah. That, I was just like, move on, guys. Move on.
Yeah.
Move on. You guys, this is the first scene you two have had 5 minutes before the movie ends. Like, we don't need this. None of it.
It is a bit of a, it's a minor criticism in an otherwise great film, but it is very soap opera-ish.
It is definitely. So people say that Kathy, that Jane Greer, is the queen of film noir. And we sort of talked about this a little bit earlier, but I mean, as I said, I think she sort of outshines Bridget O'Shaughnessy in The Maltese Falcon. I think she outshines Vickers as Carmen Sternwood in the Big Sleep. Again, we've had a big discussion on Vickers, and a lot of that isn't her fault if she had more. That we've already had the discussion. So I do think as I sit here and think about Femme Fatales and on screen, she might be the perfect Femme Fatale.
Yeah, I'm finding it difficult to think of one that I prefer. What I like about the performance is it's not quite as showy as it could have been. She could have overplayed the wicked side, the evil side, and she doesn't. It's a magnetic performance. It really is. But as we were saying before, I like the ambiguity, and I like the complication of her motive and what she's trying to get out of all this. Certainly of the original run of film noir, I think if she's not the top, she's damn close to it. I think some of the neo-noir have equally interesting, not least in Chinatown. She's adapting when her circumstances demand it, whereas very often these femme fatales show one side of their character when the plot demands it. This is much more organic, I think, both as a performance and as a bit of script writing.
And the fascinating thing is there's also stuff sort of behind the scenes that make me think of her as like she's not that far off from her character of Kathy. Jane is not that far off from Kathy. And I don't know if you know much about this, but so she was a model initially who was discovered by Howard Hughes, who thought, hey, she's a hottie. I want to get her into movies. And he basically sort of controlled what movies she could or couldn't be. And I guess for a while she was sort of swept off her feet by him, and they were lovers, but he was also a mentor and a teacher to her or something like that. And then, obviously then out of nowhere, because she didn't have a big career. Like her career was not an illustrious career. It was very tumultuous and didn't go very far. But that's shocking given how fantastic she is. As an actor and particularly in this movie. So like Howard Hughes lent her to RKO to do this movie. There's conflicting stories, but one says that he loaned her to RKO. Another one says that her husband managed to work a deal, but she basically was sick of this contract where he was really quite possessive over her, and like early on would like call her in the middle of the night when she was asleep and like tell her to come out to dinner with him like right then and there, and she's like, I'm in bed. He's like, no, come out right now. And like it almost felt like she was like she understood the Whit relationship, right?
Yeah,
because
definitely.
Whit is very much controlling her this whole time and all that kind of stuff. And then to make it even like more nuts is after Out of the Past comes out, she basically breaks her contract with Hughes and is, doing some films. But then Hughes buys RKO. And basically says, as long as he owns a studio, she's not going to work, essentially because he doesn't like her husband. And then really she has a very pitiful career afterwards and doesn't really get anywhere beyond this. I'm like, so it's nuts to me, like the queen of noir. Like I feel like there's so many similarities between Greer's character of Kathy and her life, and the way she had to deal with Howard Hughes controlling her life, and how Kathy wanted to get away from Whit, who was also controlling her life. You're like, you sort of understand why these femme fatales are the way they are.
Yeah, definitely. She probably channeled some of that. We've got to say a word about Robert Mitchum. I think we talked about Kirk Douglas and Jane Greer, but I mean, Mitchum is fantastic in this.
Oh, he is.
And they wanted Bogart, they wanted John Garfield, and they wanted Dick Powell. They wanted Dick Powell. And again, I don't think any of those would have been as good as Mitchum in this. And the fact that Mitchum is he's laid back, but if you watch him closely in this, his eyes are all over the place.
Yes.
There's a bit where Douglas has turned up in Mexico, and they go to the bar. They go to the hotel bar, and he sees Kathy come in, and he's instantly, he knocks the drink over Whit's lap, and says, "What can I tell you? She got on a ship. If you want to go to the shipping company now," and he brazens it out. And in Mitchum's performance at the table, he's the indignant private eye whose word is being challenged. Yeah. But as he's walking out, he looks very, very subtly to his right to make sure that she's not seeing him. It's subtle acting, that, from a man who isn't given enough credit for how subtle he can be. He can deal with a gangster, he can deal with a gun, but he can't deal with her.
Yeah.
Somehow that packs more of a punch because he is so obviously a tough guy.
Yeah.
Whereas Dick Powell isn't, and I don't necessarily think Bogart is as obvious a tough guy looking as Mitchum is. And Mitchum goes on to play Max Cady for heaven's sake. He's obvious. He's an intimidating man, Robert Mitchum. So to see him played, like a cat's paw is just is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And in many ways, that makes it perfect casting. For me, at least, that makes it perfect casting.
I totally agree. I couldn't picture anyone else in this role. Looking at the people who they were considering, like Mitchum is perfect in this. And I agree. It's kind of what I was saying earlier, like comparing the performance to Ryan Gosling in Drive, where it's, in Drive, Ryan Gosling is very, very straight faced. It's very much small emotions are coming out through looks and smirky, things like, and subtle movements. And I thought he was doing that wonderfully throughout this whole movie. Robert Mitchum was. Yeah. Particularly that scene that you mentioned. I loved that scene in Mexico when Whit turns up, like from the knocking on the door to the bar scene, like that was just, and once Whit finally gets in the car and drives away, we all sort of sigh with relief.
Yeah. I think he visibly does.
I think so. I think he does.
And then I also like his performance towards the end when he thinks he's got them all. He knows he can get. He's a way of getting her in prison. He's a way of getting the tax records back. He's a way of getting the affidavit that proves he killed Fisher.
Yeah.
Destroyed.
Yeah.
He's playing wit rather than the other way around, and he thinks he's got the upper hand. His performance then is so sort of laconic and sort of, well, I'll just be outside on the balcony while you two talk it over. And that sort of confidence that he does. Yeah. So he can do the whole range for me. I think he's superb in this. This is almost a sort of, if he played Marlowe in the right era,
yes,
I think this is what we would have got, and I think it would have been an absolutely knockout. I really do.
Yeah, like this era of Mitchum in a string of Philip Marlowe adaptations
would have been amazing.
Oh,
it would have been amazing.
I think there are two last things that are worth mentioning with this movie that I found interesting, and one, they're both to deal with representation. I found it very fascinating that there was a scene set in a black club.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very early on, and it sort of reminded me a little bit of the Marlowe scene in Farewell, My Lovely, where he goes to a black bar, all black bar. But this one plays out quite differently, and it's interesting because Jeff, and it gives you insight into Jeff's character and what kind of a person he is. He goes into this place, and you can see these people looking at him like, what's this white guy doing in here? What's this guy doing? But there's people at the club who know him. and he knows, and they, there's a bond there, and they're vouching for him. I like the way that whole scene plays out. It's just very cool and calm and relaxed, and he's talking to a black girl who used to work for Kathy. But it's funny because the guy sitting next to her is just kind of like staring at him the whole time, like, what is this guy doing? And like, get out of here. But I also love the fact that after she gives him some information, he then pays for their drinks and stuff.
He buys around. But I also like the fact that there's no big deal made about it. He gets some looks, but there's no dialogue to say that this is an all black bar and he shouldn't really be in there. You're right. There's indications he's been in there before. Maybe on business, maybe on, maybe for leisure. We don't really know. Doesn't really matter, I suppose. But, there's no great fanfare about it. It just is a black bar and he goes in. Whereas I can't help thinking that something would have been made of it these days. And, a point would have been made. As
we've said before in the past, like, representation is great and we need it. And this was the movie's way of trying to, like, say something, be like, look, here's this thing. Look, it's we're trying to show something about life and those tensions. I think
that's right. I agree, because there's actually no real reason why it should be a black bar.
No, it doesn't need
why that character should be black. There's no actual reason for it other than to make that point, really, I think.
So I really love that scene in this movie. I thought that was a really important scene, actually. There was
it's an important scene for different reasons, for a lot of different reasons.
The other thing, again, was the kid. The fact that the kid is a deaf kid who knows sign language and speaks sign language to Jeff, like, and there's nothing really sort of hung on that. It's just the way it is.
It's just a fact of his life. Because he's mute as well, isn't he? He's set up without any sort of fanfare again. Nothing's made of it. It's not a plot point. It's just that he's Jeff's mate. He obviously works there. He's given him a job, which again says something about Jeff's character. But it's good that, that is being represented in a film from 60 odd years ago.
I know. And it's funny to me.
He's only in, I don't know, 3 or 4 scenes, is it? But
they all count. They all count.
He does something important in all of them. Yes. And arguably, his lie at the end to Anne, or his truth at the end to Anne, depending on how you read it, is the most important scene of all.
Yes.
Arguably. So it starts with the kid, and it ends with the kid.
Yes.
It starts with the kid protecting Jeff, and it ends with him either protecting Jeff or protecting Anne, or both. That kid bookends this movie.
Yeah.
Serving vital character points.
I think it's like you were saying, there's an element of realism to it, and to the characters, to who they are and why the way they are, and how they engage with the world. All of that feels very real and lived in. Did you know there was a remake in 1984 starring Rachel Ward and Jeff Bridges?
I did, and I think I've seen it.
I've not seen it.
I've seen it, and I don't remember it, so I won't be too harsh. But everything that I can remember of it, and that I've read about it, suggests that it's a typical 1980s shallow, slick remake that misses the whole point.
Well, I can't wait to watch it.
I mean, I think Jeff Bridges I think he's an ex-baseball player or something.
There's a lot of change to it. The names are different and things like that. So it's all very, very different. But okay. So how many Falcons would you give Out of the Past 1947?
Oh, hell. I'm going to say 5.
I'm going to give it 4.5. And I'm only giving it 4.5. I'm knocking a little bit off solely because of the Jimmy stuff.
For Jimmy.
For Jimmy. The film otherwise is perfect. But that Jimmy moment at the beginning of the movie and at the end of the movie just feel a bit superfluous.
For me, it's he's on screen so little that he's lost in the rest of it. And I by the time I remember him, I've already thought this is a 5 Falcon film. So I'm gonna. He isn't that much. He isn't in it enough for me to be that irritated by that. I knock off half a Falcon. Let's put it that way.
Maybe I'll like push it up to like 4.7 or 4.9. You know what I mean? a little, just a small shaving has to come off for me for Jimmy, but otherwise, an absolutely perfect film. Well, folks, that's our investigation into Out of the Past, and thanks for joining us on it. We hope to see you back in the consulting rooms next week. Until then, please do like and subscribe, and make sure to take care walking down those mean streets.